Hello there, and welcome to Spectrum Debate number 23. Whether you're watching live on YouTube, Google+, or on our website at spectrumdebates.com, you are, as ever, very welcome. As this is our last show before Thursday's general election, tonight we're going to discuss everything that's happened so far, the highs and lows of the general and local election campaigns, and what's going to happen on Thursday and beyond. As ever, with all of our shows, we want to hear your views, and we want you to send in questions or points to challenge each of our guests. You can do so on Twitter using the hashtag SD23, and I'll do my best to put your questions to our guests and to let all of our viewers know what you are thinking. If you are watching on Google+, you can use the Applause app, which is The Worm, and at around about 9 o'clock over on SpectrumDebates.com, a poll is launched which will ask you who your favourite debater from tonight was. Now, big thank you to Leon French, who did a superb job hosting this show last week. Very grateful to you, Leon. And the winner of last week's post-show poll, with 41% of the vote, was Lily Summers from the Labour Party. Well done, Lily, and thank you very much indeed. Now, without further ado, let me introduce you to each of our guests from left to right on my screen. We begin with Daryl Devine, who is here as an independent. He's coming from Scotland. Good evening, Daryl, sorry. How are you?
Howdy there. I'm all right.
And whereabouts are you broadcasting from tonight?
A wee bit south of Glasgow tonight, as every night.
Marvellous. Thank you very much indeed. It's always good to have someone north of the border. Dylan Morris will be familiar to many of you as well. He's been on quite a bit. Dylan is a Liberal Democrat and coming from the southwest tonight. Good evening, Dylan. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, Gareth. How are you?
Superb. Of course, naturally I am in awe of your hair, as I'm sure many of our audience will be.
Thank you very much. Just resprayed it?
Well, of course. I mean, you can't come live on air without a good respray. Thank you very much. Our next guest is John Mousley from UKIP, who is here tonight broadcasting from Aberystwyth. How are you, John?
I'm very well, thank you, Gareth. Thanks for having me.
It's good to see you again. Just to point out, it's your fault we were delayed because you were, I think, murdering somebody for interrupting you. Not an actual murder, of course, we hope.
Yeah.
We hope. I'm glad to see you so non-committal on that one. Thank you very much. Our next guest is another returnee. It's Liam Bones from the Conservatives. Good evening, Liam. How are you?
Good evening. I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm superb. And where is it you're broadcasting from tonight?
I'm broadcasting from Newcastle in the northeast.
See, we've got a great array of people from all over the place here this evening, and very, very suitable backdrop there. In fact, the most suitable backdrop of the night, I think, considering what we're talking about. Welcome to the show. And last but by no means least, it's Nathaniel Higgins of the Green Party, who has been on the show before. Good evening, Nathaniel. How are you?
I'm good, thank you very much.
We have worked out that as you're in Leeds, you're also furthest, we think, from any coastline, and should dreadful climate change happen during the course of this show, you will be the last one to survive. So be prepared. Thank you very much for joining us again. Good evening to all of you. Just to remind you, my name is Gareth, and for full disclosure, I am a Conservative, but I'll do my best to play devil's advocate and to challenge all of our guests and explore each topic in detail tonight. Before we get going, though, of course, I just wanted to start off by remembering some of the delightful, embarrassing moments of the campaign so far. Of course, we begin with the Conservatives, who were who last week were criticised for proposing, frankly, a rather pointless legal ban on tax rises, which people pointed out was fairly ridiculous. You just don't raise taxes if you don't want to raise taxes. Of course, today that was eclipsed by the Labour Party, who unveiled an 8-foot stone monolith to be installed at Downing Street if they win on Thursday, to much general derision, although, of course, the last stone monolith they had in Downing Street didn't fare very well. After all, Gordon Brown did lose the last election. The Lib Dems, of course, in all this are very happy that Danny Alexander's yellow lunchbox and alternative budget have been forgotten by everybody, but then, of course, everybody's pretty much forgotten the Lib Dems. UKIP have been defending their comments from their leader about people with HIV, made to howls of disgust at the last debate. And, of course, the Greens under Natalie Bennett. And I think that covers that one. Without further ado, let's see what any of you think have been the highs or lows of the election campaign so far. Does anyone want to tell me something they think has been particularly memorable?
Do you mind if I start?
Please do.
I think personally for my party I can cover highs and lows with candidates, to be honest. So high for me, one of our candidates being accused of trying to bribe voters with sausage rolls and being investigated by the police, but being let off and then proceeding to annoy everyone by quoting Hitler to just rankle with everyone.
Yeah, I mean, the sausage roll is one thing, but the Hitler quote is quite another, really, isn't it? I mean,
he said he did it to show why he thought the country was becoming, which I thought was hilarious.
Yeah, you see, I wonder because Nigel Farage was very keen, wasn't he, yesterday or the day before too. He said very clearly that he had sent an instruction to UKIP candidates to crack open a beer or something to celebrate the royal baby being born, but he doesn't seem able to have sent out an instruction to his candidates to not say anything that's really bloody stupid.
Nope.
Stupidity is a matter of opinion, isn't it?
I must admit, though, this election has been less bad for that. I remember the Euro elections with great fondness, and just the kitchen sink being thrown at us beforehand, with candidates' entire history seeming being dug up or made up. And this one doesn't seem to have been quite as bad.
Yes, perhaps that's a relief for many of us. Darryl, did I hear you during that?
Well, stupidity is a matter of opinion, of course. It's due to this wonderful country that we can say those things and the kind of the public, you know, deciding if they think that sounds like a good idea or not, isn't it?
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, what do we think? Let's talk about UKIP for a moment. Seeing as we've started off in that sense talking about the sausage roll gate and HIV gate. Nathaniel, I'm going to come to you on this one. How do you think the presence of UKIP in this campaign has affected the tone of political debate?
Well, there's a lot of people that don't want UKIP to be as popular as they are, and I'm probably one of the few Green Party voters that is kind of rather supportive of another rising minor party, simply because it shows the need for STB as such. I think the running message of this campaign, of this general election, is that the current system isn't working anymore, and that we need something that accommodates how people are voting more and more.
Would you all agree that this campaign shows that the political system we have, particularly the electoral system, is just not working?
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
I mean, the Liberals have said this for years, haven't they, Dylan?
Yeah, it's kind of been our running thing.
Yeah, finally having got into government, it's actually possibly going to be first past the post that saves the Liberals from complete annihilation, isn't it? And have we lost Dylan already?
Something that I find quite interesting and is quite possibly one of the first nails in the coffin for first past the post is that the SNP, a party that is going to benefit massively from it, wants to get rid of it, and that when more parties that are actually benefiting from first past the post want to change it, then that's kind of a message that it really does need to change.
We don't have Dylan back yet, do we? No. Liam, the Conservative Party's benefited for a long time from the political system as it is, because it's alternated in government over the last 150, 200 years with ease. Isn't it time for it to change, though? I mean, couldn't the Conservatives argue that there's big benefit in changing?
I personally don't agree that there is big benefit in changing. I mean, if you just look at this election, it's probably one of the most unpredictable elections in the past 100 years at least, but the reason that first past the post is the best option right now is that it delivers strong governments. So fair enough, in 2010 it did deliver a strong government, but if we don't have first past the post and we have an alternative system which is going to bring rise to smaller parties, it's more unlikely that we're going to have a stable government who can actually put through reform.
I mean, that is a pretty good point, isn't it, Daryl? Because we're potentially going to have a problem here with one of the two major parties of the UK being quite handily hammered in Scotland by the SNP. Now, as someone who's from north of the border, how do you view this big sea change? And how's that going to affect Scotland and the rest of the UK?
Well, I think for us, at the very least, it is going to be a good thing, because the party that currently dominates over the UK, the Conservatives, only have one MP here, and that's Ruth Davison, who, of course, is in charge of the Scottish Conservatives. And I think it was certainly a bad thing for us when we were ruled over by a party with such little support here. And I think that definitely something has to change in respect to that.
Right, Dylan. Sorry, Dylan.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, it's okay. These things happen. You vanished before we came to you. Just going to ask you. I mean, the Liberal Democrats currently their polling has dropped to lower than a third of what they got in 2010. Mm-hmm. Could it not be the case that actually first past the post is what rescues the Liberals this time by them managing to maintain a much higher number of seats than they should otherwise have?
Yeah, I totally get that point. A lot of people think that tactical voting is going to save us in certain seats. And I do agree with that. I think that's fair enough. And I think a lot of people, especially in places like Cambridge and maybe even in Sheffield, I think it will save some of our top MPs, so we'll save their seats. I do still believe that we need to change the voting system, though. I know the referendum in 2011 was quite damning, but I still believe there's a real appetite for change, especially with the rise of more minor parties. I think in 2011 we had a system that everyone was kind of okay with first past the post, but with more people supporting third parties and fourth parties, people are actually saying, you know what, we're going to get a lot of the votes, but we're not going to get the seats, and the people that are voting for them are feeling quite cheated out of their vote.
Okay, now a few comments that we've had online so far, and then I'm going to we're going to discuss a little at something that Christopher Keane has tweeted at us. William Brown at W_O_Brown has tweeted, "Forgotten Danny, have we? I thought that's because he's already packed," and he's tweeted a lovely picture of Danny Alexander with the yellow budget box that I have now retweeted. Gavin at Blue Liberal 1, the 45% will get 90% of the seats. That's in Scotland. We need PR. Matt and the Banshees at Stradihoovius. UKIP has been a detriment to this election, bringing a spectrum, lol, of arguments time and time again back to migration. SD, Big Brother, S_debate_news, host Gareth Stone, no BBC QT, jumpers are cool, technical difficulties are cool, banter, always late, used to be an hour long. I think that's a list of things that he wants to talk about, I'm not sure. Stone Age H at capt_facetious. Changing the voting system would mean even more extreme parties can get into government. Chris G at Chris G0000. The AV referendum campaign was effectively a referendum on first past the post. The result wasn't even close. 13,013,000 for no change. 6,152,000 for change. So some comments there. I'm just going to shift the debate slightly now. Christopher Keane has, and I'm going to rephrase this slightly for delicacy reasons, but he asks, why is Miliband such an inept individual? Labour should be winning a landslide after awful coalition policies. I don't know who'd like to have a go at trying to explain that one first, as we don't have a Labour representative here tonight. I'll do my best to defend poor Mr. Miliband.
Yeah, I'll come in on that quickly.
Go on.
I don't think the coalition's policies have been that bad, to be totally honest. I think a lot of people are giving them a lot of stick, as you would near election time, and I think that Labour are going on the offensive quite quickly because they haven't really got a defensive, because their default thing is, oh, look at our leader. When they had Blair, they said, oh, look who our Prime Minister would be, but they can't say that anymore. And they can't say they've not got a good record on economics. Their record on social policy is being matched by the Liberal Democrats now, so they can't attack them on that front. The coalition, I think, has done pretty well. It does help the coalition parties that Labour is quite inept in terms of their leader. I'm not sure exactly what words Christopher used, but I probably agree with him, whatever words he used. As long as it was denigrating Ed Miliband, I'm pretty sure he's probably right. It does help the coalition parties that Miliband is quite weak, but I think he's actually getting better. I mean, I'm sure other people will disagree, but I think apart from this massive bit of stone today. Apart from that, I think he's actually made quite a few good decisions in terms of campaigning. I think he's actually doing quite well as a leader, and you can see his net approval ratings going up daily, which is, you know, obviously great for Labour, not so great for us, but still quite good for Labour.
Anyone else who agrees, disagrees?
I think I disagree slightly, to be honest.
Tell Dylan why he's wrong.
I don't think Miliband's actually that bad a leader, to be honest. I think he's on a similar calibre with Clegg and Cameron, to be honest. I mean, let's not forget Cameron is the Tory leader that failed to beat Gordon Brown. Gordon Brown, we'd hardly agree, was a master of politics and political campaigning. So Miliband's expectations have been very low, so he looks quite good. But I don't think his competition is that great either. If we look at Clegg, Clegg's major thing was the EU, and he got handed to him by Farage in a debate one-on-one. Cameron, as I said, couldn't beat Brown, and Ed, despite his low expectations, is probably a similar calibre to them. I mean, they all have similar backgrounds, similar training. I mean, I think this is the fact Labour are being massacred by the SNP is more of a sign less of Ed Miliband being inept, though he is pretty bland. It's more a sign that people just aren't buying the Labour message anymore. And a similar thing is happening with the
isn't that the whole point? Because the whole point of a party's leader is to give that message, and he's had longer, and known that he's had longer than any other leader in recent years, because he's had almost 5 years to develop a message, to build this brand, to give people something to hang on to. And it looks like he's not even going to be able to hang on to his heartland of Scotland, which was always a Labour banker. Surely that's a sign of absolutely appalling. It's like the Conservatives losing every seat in Kent and Surrey. They didn't even manage that in 1997.
Right, but I think it's...
Oh, you're going.
I think it's more a sign of the message. I mean, Miliband, yes, had 5 years, but in those 5 years, what radical changes has he made to the Labour Party, who have been allowed to make change to the Labour Party? I mean, let's tackle the big three: economics, immigration, the EU. Has he changed anything from Blair? I mean, the Labour government, the Labour leadership, the Labour hierarchy has a very set agenda, same as the Tories, same as the Lib Dems, same as all parties, and they haven't allowed him to change it, or he hasn't wanted to change it. So now he's going to be battered over the head by the voters.
Daryl.
Well, my thoughts on Ed Miliband is that he's a bit of a crash site of a human being, because just a few days ago he ruled out any sort of partnership with the SNP, and he said that if they got into power, he would sooner relinquish control over to the Tories rather than make any kind of deal with the SNP. What kind of a man thinks that that's a good idea to say, that he's going to throw away all the power?
It's a very good idea to say, actually, because he doesn't need a deal with the SNP, because the SNP will support them anyway to avoid giving power towards the Tories. But
but why did he say that he's...
Not saying that, though, would give people the impression that they can vote for the SNP and get a Labour government. And that he's trying to say, no, you can't do that. If you want a Labour government, vote for a Labour government. And that's the message he should be giving.
No.
Well, he worded that absolutely dreadfully, because he said there will be no Labour government if they try to work with us. I would sooner hand it all over to the Conservatives. That's a terrible message to say. And then, you know, to bring out a giant stone plaque of the Ten Commandments, you know, was just bizarre on top of that, I think.
But in terms of just to try and give a little bit of... Yeah, just try and give a little bit of pro-Labour and Miliband position here. And Daryl, I'm going to ask you about this. It does make perfect sense, doesn't it, for Ed Miliband to say, look, people of Scotland, if you vote SNP, you're not going to get a Labour government. You know, you don't know what you're going to get, and you might well end up with a Conservative one, because I'm not going to work with the SNP.
So
really not saying to people, if you want rid of the Conservatives, you've got to vote Labour. And that's quite a simple message for the Labour Party, isn't it?
Well, I think it's quite a convoluted message due to the methods that he's going through to try and establish that. If people wanted a Labour government, then they would have just voted Labour, but the fact is that Scottish Labour, headed by Jim Murphy, has just been an absolute train wreck up here now. And people aren't interested in Scottish Labour anymore. They are turning over to SNP for something different, not just to have the exact same as what Labour are. They do want more sort of ideals of old Labour as opposed to new Labour, but that's why they're going to the SNP. They don't want what Labour has now become. So they're not interested if he says, I'm going to turn it over to the Tories or Labour or not. They're still going to go for SNP.
Okay. Anyone else on the role of Ed Miliband? I mean, he really has pushed the Conservatives, hasn't he, Liam? Because he's made the Conservatives come up with ideas such as, we'll add an extra $8 billion to the NHS, and they've not said how they'll pay for it. We'll give you 30 hours of free childcare after Labour said we'll give you 20 hours of free childcare. Miliband has really pushed the Conservatives.
I think in some ways he has pushed us to have sort of a broader range of policies for working families other than just the economic argument. But to go back to the point about the SNP in Scotland, Miliband ruling out coalition with the SNP last Thursday, I don't think that was aimed at the people in Scotland as much as it was aimed at the people in England to sort of fight the message that the Conservatives have been putting out, that if you vote for Ed Miliband, you're going to get propped up by the SNP. So I think Miliband recognises that he's lost Scotland and that there's not much that he can do to try and win that back. But now he's trying to convince people in England and Wales that voting for Labour isn't going to get the SNP in there, even though it is the only way it would happen. And this morning I've read quite a few of the Sunday papers. I mean, obviously that was not because it was a cute baby on the front, but that's besides the point.
You just had to bring up the baby.
They all seem to think that on Friday, if Ed Miliband hasn't got within 10 seats of the Conservatives, then the Conservatives are going to continue. And there's no way that if he has ruled out a coalition, even if they're going to support him, which they said they wouldn't, without a formal deal, they're not going to support him if they're not going to get anything in return, because that's just not politics. So if I think the SNP are going to do well in this election, probably Scotland goes back to Labour next election because the SNP haven't got a better deal for Scotland. And Miliband sort of sees that and realises that Scotland's a short-term thing, but now the focus is on England.
Good, interesting point there. Yeah,
can I just ask something? Why does everyone think David Cameron is doing extremely well when it looks like the Conservatives are going to gain less votes than they did last election, and that Ed Miliband is terrible when it looks like that Labour are going to gain more votes?
I don't think Cameron's doing well.
From a purely psephological point of view, then, Nathaniel, the Conservatives gained more votes in 01 than they did in 97, and 05 than they did in 01, but that didn't mean they were going to win the election, and likewise Labour's vote declined in that time. So in and of itself, it's not going to tell you much, is it?
No, I'm not necessarily talking about winning the election, I'm just talking about leading a party. There are more people that are going to vote for Labour this election than last election, and there are less people that are going to vote for the Conservatives than they did last election, and that's I think partly because of the leaders. People are starting to like Ed Miliband, and people are starting to dislike David Cameron.
But
okay.
That's just general swing. That's just general swing. So at any election, there's going to be a swing towards the opposition. That's just how it works. But the point is that if the swing had worked like it normally would, Ed Miliband would be miles and miles ahead. And the Conservatives have managed to hold their own in that they're still on slightly ahead or even on par with Labour in the polls. So holding their own is doing better than how it would normally be at this point.
Thank you. A few more comments from Twitter, and there's been an awful lot on this one. So, for example, Joseph Hudson-Small, at Joe Hudson-Small, I think Miliband's approach is different to what we're used to, but it's not actually that bad. The changing climate with the SNP is going to be a bigger hit to Labour than Miliband will be. James at Statism Room 101, does everything have to come back to the EU? Chris G, Farage, to the surprise of many, didn't beat Miliband in 2 debates. Labour's biggest problem isn't their leader, it's a fundamental divide within the party. Robert Winfield, the Conservatives failed to win a majority in 2010 largely because of the bias of electoral boundaries. Trying to find more here. Joe O'Hara at Shabado_Joe. I agree with Nicola, and yet you won't work with her. Typical Lib Dem logic. Salman Anwar at S_Anwar95. One thing the SNP have really done is embody a feeling of change and euphoria, etc., like Obama in 2008. Matt and the Banshees, if you don't want Tory, you must vote Labour. Maybe a clever message, but it's also quite nasty and self-aware abuse of first past the post. Chris, at All Riff No Raff, Labour got everything wrong. Leader, policies and attitude. It's amazing such a record can put them anywhere near number 10. And in terms of the royal baby, Christopher Keane makes the point that babies are not cute. That may come back to haunt you one day, Chris. But maybe that's a topic for another debate when you're back on. Any other comments on Ed Miliband before we move on?
I think Ed Miliband does have one thing going for him, though. And we've mentioned it lots, how lots of people called him inept, and yet he wasn't beaten on the debates. And I think that's something he can play to, is everyone expects him to do so badly. He can really play to it, and even if he's just mediocre, he can look very good. And I think that's something he's been doing very well.
He has a fake symbol now, isn't he? That's quite odd.
He's a what, sorry?
He's a sex symbol now. So I heard.
I don't know if you take a vote on that one. I don't know if you feel some people might view Ed Miliband as a sex symbol. Please do tweet us.
Is that a thing?
And I don't think I want to say that phrase again because I don't want to be sick on camera. But you're right. There's that whole thing with the hen party, wasn't there, Daryl? And people seem to get a bit excited by it. Is this perhaps why he suddenly thought, I'll get my rocks out? Anything? Anything? Nobody? Okay.
We don't really know what they're thinking.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I apologise to you all at home. I will do my best not to make such an appalling attempt at a pun.
Resign.
Awful.
Resign.
I'm so sorry. We have had one piece of advice though for you, Dylan. I'm sure you don't know Darren Grimes at Darren Grimes _, but he is saying that you need to
stop biting my nails. Yeah.
Yes, there we are. Right, a next question that has been suggested. This one's come from Reach at Reach Ed, and I'm going to widen it ever so slightly. But he asks specifically, should the DUP be part of any coalition given their approach to LGBT equality? And I want us to think about that, but also think about the wider nature of coalitions and what might come out of it. So, does anyone have a view on that?
Given that half of this panel is LGBTIQ or whatever the phrase is, I'm not sure you're going to find very much support for the DUP on this panel.
No, it's just going to be me again.
Right.
Go on then, John. Tell us why the DUP should be able to be included in the coalition. After all, they have said they will work with either the Conservatives or Labour.
Well, yeah, the DUP has very few demands for coalition. They want an extra $1 billion for Northern Ireland, and that's it. So to say, because of a policy that they're not going to force on the rest of us, we're not going to work with them, seems silly.
That's not true, John. They had a list of 30 demands that they needed to be going to coalition with someone they published last Monday or Tuesday. So yeah, they've got a few more than £1 billion for Northern Ireland.
It boils down to £1 billion for Northern Ireland, more funding, less taxes, and something else. I forget the third major one. But this is the thing. Are we saying that their attitude to LGBT rights is going to be one of their key demands, and if we work with them, we must all accept it?
It's not really about that, though. It's about saying if you go into coalition with the DUP, it supports the idea that you can vote for them and get a certain government, and that's not an idea that I think any of the major parties should be supporting because of their feelings about LGBT.
But the thing is, to put it another way, I mean, both the Labour government would have to work with a number of more left-wing parties whose several of their left-wing policies would look crazy. I mean, let's leave aside giving up Trident, but I mean, would you say a Labour government could then be held to saying everything the Greens say is okay? I mean, you would do, but
yeah, it's very different to saying, you know, getting rid of nuclear warheads, denying 10% of the population their fundamental rights. A little bit different.
Yeah.
I'd say.
Also, you're ignoring the fact that Labour has ruled out a coalition with the SNP. So.
no, I'm not just saying
That's a
Labour, I'm
big
saying
one.
generally. I mean, like, would Labour, if they did a deal with the Greens on one vote, say everything the Greens have ever said is fine? I mean, we seem to be equating everything a party has ever said to.
No, it's not about that though. It's
Yeah, I
about
agree.
supporting the idea that that voting for the DUP will give a certain party the position to get into government, and that's not something that I don't want anybody to do anything that would give people more of a reason to vote for the DUP.
Quick question for you, though, for Nathaniel and Dylan on this one. If we're in a situation where neither the Conservatives nor the Labour Party can form a coalition, let's say they are, for want of a better number, 10 seats short, and the DUP ends up with 10 seats, would it not be better for the UK to be able to form a working government with at least a bare majority in the House of Commons, relying somehow on the DUP, than instead we have months and months of political turmoil with budgets not being passed and bills being defeated all the time and then another general election? Would it not be better? Because these people, after all, will have been democratically elected.
I love elections. I'm a proper geek, so I hope we have 2 elections this year. So the answer to that is no.
Well, you already know from what I've said earlier that I'm a fan of STB, and I think any result of this election that just shows that we need it more is a good thing, to be honest.
Liam, the Conservatives, equally as Labour might, be in a position where they need to somehow rely on the DUP. Would you be happy with that?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, it is difficult to say. If it's going to come down to 10 seats, I would rather try and run it as a minority than be with the DUP. But what personally I would prefer is another election than work with the DUP. I mean, at a stretch, we could work with UKIP, but I'd prefer to work with the Lib Dems.
Darryl?
Yes.
Is it the kind of thing that you think would work in Scotland? I mean, is it the kind of thing with the DUP in government in the UK, or supporting the government of the UK, assuming that Labour rules out and maintains this ruling out of the SNP? How do you think that would affect the calls for independence in Scotland, or the role of the Labour Party in Scotland, particularly if it was a Labour government relying on the DUP?
I'm not sure. It would depend what the result was in Scotland. Say if Scotland was contributed to the Labour poll, then I think they would they wouldn't see it quite as bad if they just felt they had a say in it. That's just the biggest thing that Scotland wants, is to feel that they just have some semblance of control in the country. So as long as we had that, say we voted Labour, as I said, then I'm just not sure.
Okay, a couple of comments that people have made so far on this one. Again, if you've got any other topics or topics you'd like us to discuss, tweet us on SD23, or any questions you'd like me to ask people, again, tweet us using the hashtag SD23. On this one, Chris G says, the DUP denying the fundamental right to buy a wedding cake from a particular store. Ban them, shout the liberal fascists. He also points out that the DUP wants more money for the people they represent. That's hardly a shock. The DUP made peace in Northern Ireland, whereas the SNP wants to destroy our country. Chairman Meow, Jack Hughes 666. The UKIP member is the only one supporting the DUP. Surprise, surprise. Thomas Smith at Smudge Thomas. Why should the DUP be barred? It's the UK Parliament. Salman Anwar. The DUP can. Cameron, for example, has already said he would protect rights. Like John said, they have few demands. Joe Hudson Small says, F no. Of course, this is a family show. But no, F no, they should not. And there's no debate on that. Some people commenting that they were a little bit sick when I mentioned, or rather when Darryl mentioned that Ed Miliband had become a sex symbol. So that's certainly one impact from this evening. John's fundamental argument, although a weird example, is right, says Salman Anwar. By having some sort of deal, it doesn't mean you support all of their views. Cameron S. at Cameron_surname agrees. He says, you're right, John. Whatever their views, they won't get them into legislation. They'll just get some more funding. And Chairman Meow, you cannot compare equal rights to Trident. What planet are you on? Darren Grimes, DUP have members who find it hard to accept the dinosaurs once roamed the earth. After all, but they are now MPs for the DUP, to be fair. And Matt at Stratehovius, like any regional party, the DUP cannot be as accountable as they would need to be. The abhorrent equal rights is the icing on the cake. I'm hoping that was a nice satirical line there as well, Matthew, because that was a particularly good one. William Brown, a second election this year. If that happens, I wear out even more shoes from canvassing. Instead, save my shoes and vote Conservative. And Chris, all riff no raff, coalition part 2 would be the most preferable option if another hung parliament is on the cards. I'm going to ask you all in a couple of minutes what your preferred outcome for the general election would be, if you can sort of try and keep it within the boundaries of possibility, but what your preferred outcome for the election will be. And just remind you all at home, if you have a question you'd like us to debate or a topic you'd like us to discuss, tweet us using the hashtag SD23. So I'm going to come to you first, Dylan. What would your ideal yet also somehow realistic outcome to this election be?
I'd actually prefer another coalition, Conservative Lib Dem coalition. I think the coalition's done really good work. I think we work well together. Obviously, as an ex-Tory and a current Lib Dem, I've got sympathies with the Tories still. So I think we work pretty well together. I think another Conservative Lib Dem coalition would be the best way to go.
Thank you very much. Darryl, what would your preference be?
Well, my actual preference wouldn't be at all realistic, but I think the best outcome within the world we're working in would be probably an SNP and Labour coalition.
And do you think, just on that point, I mean, here's me expressing an opinion here. I think some of the maths of the election means it would be impossible for Ed Miliband to avoid at least a supply and confidence agreement with the SNP if he wants to end up as Prime Minister.
Absolutely.
So, personally, I don't understand why. I mean, from the electoral point of view, it makes sense to try and argue there's no point voting SNP because you'll end up with a Tory government. But it's not going to happen in reality, is it?
No, I haven't got any idea why any of that means, saying that if you vote SNP you're going to end up with the Tories. It's absolutely untrue, and it's just said by people who don't want that particular politics involved. I mean, I don't know.
Fair enough. John, what's your ideal outcome to this election?
I actually have two. Short term, obviously, I'd love a Tory minority government that have to rely on true Conservatives to get through their policies. However, if I was thinking long term, I'd quite enjoy an SNP Labour government because it would destroy Labour in the north and open up several seats for us. So in 2020, we'd do much better, and then we could have a proper government.
Party over country, shameful.
A proper
long term
government
if I'm feeling evil, short term if I'm feeling nice.
A proper government meaning?
Yeah, lots of UKIP MPs to support someone.
Okay. Liam, what would your ideal outcome be?
Ideally, Conservative majority, probably not going to happen. So I prefer Conservative Lib Dem coalition.
Thank you. Nathaniel, your preferred outcome? Because at this point in time, of course, your party has the fewest MPs.
Yeah, that's true. I think, well, for me personally, it'd be a Labour SNP coalition. Simply because that would mean, one, people wouldn't vote SNP next election because there are a lot of people that are voting SNP and I would want a Labour SNP coalition. Well, simply because I don't want the Tories to be in government. I'm not going to hide that, and because it would support the idea of a STV again. That is all I want from this election, to be honest, is just showing that first past the post isn't something that works anymore. and my only want for this election is replacing first past the post.
Thank you very much. A few of the comments people have made online. Chris G asks, and I will ask you all this in a moment. In fact, we'll explore this one in a moment. Would the panel really ban any Christian or Muslim who took a traditional view of marriage from government? And I will come to you on that one. Gavin at Blue Liberal denies the idea that the DUP brought peace to Northern Ireland. He says they didn't. They only signed up in the mid-2000s because they could get power, and that they've done more harm than good to the peace treaty, to the peace until St Andrews. Salman Anwar points out the DUP have stupid views, but they're still democratically elected. Christopher Keane, an SNP majority of 650 seats. That's what he's saying. Gavin, Blue Liberal 1, a Metro Liberal caliphate, please. Joseph at Joseph D. Cassidy. Miliband doesn't need a deal to be PM. He just needs the SNP to vote for his Queen's speech, which they will. William Brown, an ideal outcome for this election. 600 seats for the Tories. The Liberals can have the rest. Realistically, a Tory majority with 330 seats. Cameron S, Cameron _ surname, is asking if his dictatorship sounds like a good idea. There'll be no deals, just his drunken edicts to follow. Chairman Meow at Jack Hughes 666. Luckily, he says no one will be relying on your one UKIP MP. Controversial there, forgive us. Joe Hudson Small, preferred outcome will be a Labour Lib Dem coalition and a small increase in seats for the Greens. The SNP and the Greens would work with the government. Pyrocutus at Pyro Lord of Fire. The DUP with 600 MPs for the lols. Darren Grimes points out that Dylan's face at the True Conservatives and UKIP comment made him scream. We've got a number of others here. Joe Pattinson, a grand coalition. Possible, but maybe he dreads the thought. And it carries on. So many interesting ideas here. James at Status Room 101. Do celebrities and politicians' wives' endorsement on political parties have any impact on election results? Nice one. I'll ask you that as well in a moment. So, quick direct question to all then, posed by Chris G. Would you ban anyone from government because of their religious beliefs dictating the form of marriage they support? John?
No.
Any reason? Any exposition on that?
Exposition on that. Not really. Well, I mean, if we're just going to start picking things to ban people on for social issues, it's going to get very tricky very quickly.
Okay, Dylan, would you ban someone from government at all because of their religious views on marriage?
No, not at all. I mean, plenty of people in Labour, not many people in Labour, but quite a few Tories, a couple of Lib Dems voted against equal marriage because of religious views. Wouldn't ban them from government. I mean, the only reason I was saying about the DUP is my preferred thing would not have them in government. It's not about banning anyone. I just don't want them in government.
Okay, Daryl, what would you do about that?
Well, it sounds like the freedom spouter again. I wouldn't ban anyone for having their religion seep into their political principles, because at the very least they admit that, and you know, as opposed to just doing things without the real explanation. And I think honestly the best way, if you don't agree with that, like I don't agree with that, I think anybody who says, you know, I'm voting for this because it's right in the word of the Lord, I think they're a bit mental. So I wouldn't vote for them. So I think, you know, it's just best to let the people decide. If everybody's just completely honest and they're open about why they're doing things, then I think with the way the world's going now and the way people's minds are changing about things, then it's best to let them decide, and I think that will get the best outcome. So they should be allowed to say what they want, and people can decide from there.
Thank you very much. That was nice and comprehensive. Liam, would you ban someone because of their religious views on marriage?
No, not as such. You can't ban them from government because of their religious views, but it should be like encouraged that equality is for everyone. So they shouldn't be sort of prevalent as much. So like party lines shouldn't go on it and stuff like that.
Thank you. And finally, Nathaniel?
No, because if they are in the position where they could be in government, it's because people have voted for them, and we shouldn't ban people based on their views when people have voted for their views.
Thank you very much, Chris. I don't know if that's going to satisfy you on that score, but you have heard from our panelists on that one. A very important question here from Josh at Josh Aaron R. Does Gareth have a really massive mug, or is he really tiny? Josh, that's entirely up to you to decide. So here's the evidence.
Crikey, it is big.
Yeah.
Oh.
Moving swiftly on. Just a couple more points from that before I move on to that next question. We've had the Gunslinger, where are we? At the Oncoming, says, coming from someone in Northern Ireland, no to a DUP involvement in government. They make UKIP look like hippies. Can you imagine such a thing, John? A party that makes you look like hippies.
There are lots of them.
Lots of what? Hippies in UKIP?
There are lots of parties that make us look like hippies.
Okay, let's not explore that any further. Yes, and Gareth Soy, I saw that a moment ago. Yes, at Gareth Soy, it's always prepared to read out a tweet from someone called Gareth. I just get this feeling that they're going to be really well thought of. It's probably best to get the DUP involved in the 21st century first. Although on the other hand, the 20th century might be a start. So. Yes, there we are. The next question for you all is the one that has just been asked by Statism Room 101, if I remember correctly. Yes, James. This week, the Labour Party has unfurled its celebrity rally, and it's got a snooker player and some actors involved, urging people to go out and vote Labour. What role do celebrities play in elections? Do people listen to them? Should they listen to them? Does it actually swing anybody? Liam, your view on the role of celebrities in elections. Is it important? Does it have an effect?
I think it has more of an effect. Oh, I'm going to get shouted at for this. I think it has more of an effect for sort of Labour voters and left-wing voters who might be on as in tune with politics as some in the centre or on the right might be. So they see a celebrity and they're like, oh yeah, we'll vote for them. So the Conservatives have Martin Freeman, and the Labour have Martin Freeman, people like that, and we as a party don't really do celebrities as much. We use Boris, who's a celebrity himself, but I don't think they sway the vote as much, but they probably do a little bit, and that shouldn't be the case, I don't think.
Okay. Nathaniel, does the Green Party have any celebrity supporters? Oh, well, of course, you've got Russell Brand.
Russell Brand.
Yes, yeah. Well, I think as a party we don't have as many as we do people who support Caroline Lucas. Because, well, for one, Caroline Lucas is an example of what MP should be, I think, and the people showed that too when she was voted the best MP in the country. And in terms of celebrity involvement, I think celebrities, we shouldn't listen to celebrities, but we do on everything, not just politics. As a country, we listen to them for everything, and so involving them in your campaign is just showing that you understand the people and what the people listen and respond to, rather than trying to speak to them in ways that they're not going to understand. Like, yeah, sorry.
Does Russell Brand understand the people?
I think he does.
Does it? I mean, I'm just wondering. Does he understand people? Where does he best understand people from? I mean, does Russell Brand best understand people from his 4.4 litre V8 Range Rover, from his private jet, or from his £77,000 a year rented apartment in London? I mean, I'm wondering where gives him the best platform to understand the lives of ordinary people.
Gareth, I didn't mean that the individual celebrities understand the people. I meant that when parties use celebrities, it's because the parties understand the people, not the celebrities themselves. People listen to celebrities. That's a fact that everyone will accept, and using them shows that you understand, as a party, understand the people and what they'll listen to. But no, I don't think that celebrities necessarily understand the general population.
Okay. Right. So the SNP, of course. I'm going to pop up to Scotland here, Daryl. The SNP are very famous for having Sean Connery support them, and a whole host of other figures from Scottish media and the arts and journalism. Did that play much of a role in the independence referendum? Just on that point.
Well, from a few people, yes, depending on what their actual position was. There was a lot of people who were interested in things that academics or even comedians had to say. Frankie Boyle, I remember, had quite a large voice in the Scottish referendum, and a lot of people definitely agreed with what he said. In terms of Sean Connery, by the way, nobody listens to Sean Connery. He's not lived here for about 40 years. And although he did have similar views to me, I don't believe that someone in his position should really be speaking about it. Even David Tennant realised that when someone asked him in an interview, "What's your opinions on the referendum?" He said, "Oh, I can't really have a voice. I've been living in England for so many years now." So it really just depends on the person themselves. Like, I don't believe, anybody should be listening to, one of them, the only way is Essex, about the election. But when it comes to, just when it comes to people such as, although saying comedian sounds like a strange thing, quite often comedians are quite political and they know their stuff in terms of that. I think really it just comes down to everybody's allowed an opinion, and you can choose to listen to those who are given a greater voice by the media. You can choose to listen to them or not, but you should ultimately make up your own mind.
Thank you very much. A few of the tweets, then I'll come to the rest of you. Daniel who points out that David Attenborough and Joanna Lumley support the Greens. Just saying. That's counterbalanced by Darren Grimes pointing out, saying, "Gareth, how do you forget the Green supporting Dame Vivienne Westwood and a hypocrisy supporting Green tax avoidance policy?" Other people pointing out here, Chairman Meow at Jack Hughes, 666, "I'm not taking political advice from a hobbit," echoed by Chris G. "When the hobbit told me to vote Labour in the party political broadcast, it made me think twice," he says. Where are we? What else have we got here? Joe Hudson Small says, "Unfortunately, I agree with Liam. Left and centre voters are younger, so some are more likely to be persuaded by simple endorsements. On the other hand, Joseph D. Cassidy says, is Liam essentially saying that Labour voters are stupid? It's pretty offensive if so. Does anyone remember Gary Barlow from 2010? I remember him from my childhood when Take That were big, and he ruined life for every teenage boy. So we'll not go over that one. Pyro the Crazy Fool, you've changed that during this broadcast. That is impressive. Bilbo Baggins told me to vote Labour. Does that mean that David Cameron is Smaug? I've never had to say that. My confession, Smaug. I've not seen the films. Well, I've seen one of them.
I saw the first one and then just didn't want to see the rest of them.
They pronounce it wrong in the films, so I've heard.
Right. Well, I haven't read the books either, so I'm basically on the Hobbit issues. Where are we? Jacob Rees-Mogg and Dennis Skinner says William Brown are two of the hardest working MPs, and they're certainly the hardest working MPs by hours worked. Chris G, for years Labour had Victor Meldrew campaigning for them. They told him his catchphrase was very unhelpful. Matt is wishing he'd volunteered for this now. He thinks the topics work for his strengths, but don't worry, there's many future episodes, and I'm sure you'll be able to help shape them and get them something you'd like to talk about. Where are we? What else have we got going on here? Okay, some people have obviously started watching after quite a few minutes after everybody else, so we'll come on to that one. Now, John, UKIP. And now, UKIP, of course, had the very helpful support of, first of all, of Mike Reid, the DJ, who released that song that caused a few problems. And naturally, not forgetting, because we can't let it go by, you've got Mike Reid, the former DJ, who released a song that was accused of being racist, and you've got child-murdering Ian Brady. Now, have you found these, as a party, useful endorsements? Are they touching your core vote?
On Mike Reid, that song was way better live at the party conference. On Ian Brady, I'm not going to answer that because I don't think it deserves it.
No, fair enough. That was me being cheeky. Plus, of course, Ian Brady doesn't even get a vote.
Yeah. Conservative more generally, I think it's almost cynical to use them, to be honest. If you're a serious political party who believes your message can work for people, you shouldn't need to get a Hobbit or an actor or someone to go, these guys are great, honest. You should be able to go to people and go, we're great for these reasons. So these people who, Labour especially, who line up 40 whoever's, I'm going to sound really out of touch, but I didn't know most of those people. But if you line up 40 people and get them to say Labour's great, that just shows you as a party can't be bothered to go around and tell people why you're great personally. And I think it speaks to something very bad. I mean, you mentioned Frankie Boyle. Frankie Boyle lived in Scotland, knew Scottish politics. He can have an opinion because he lives and breathes the Scottish political scene. But if it's instead of a campaign, you're just getting people to go vote for them, instead of going around and doing the hard work, then I think it just says something very bad about our democracy.
I think in response to that, it's more because for the left wing, there are more people who would support the views of the left wing that are younger, and because of how the political system is at the moment, young people generally don't care as much, and so you need people that they do care about to try and get them interested in politics. So
I completely disagree. Speaking as the party of plain-speaking patriotism, if you go around and talk to young people and offer them something different, they'll agree with you, right or left. It just takes work.
As a young person, we tried to talk about politics in our class, and everyone was, I don't care.
But I think that's just because ditto. But I think that's just because everyone's been fed this thing of it's either Tories or Labour, and if you vote something else, it won't work.
No, it's because young people aren't as interested in politics, and that's by design.
I agree, but you can get them interested. You don't need to get people to tell them they should be interested. You can do it yourself.
You get them interested in politics by getting people who they listen to and are interested in to talk to them about politics.
If they're going to get interested into politics because of someone who's been on a TV show once rather than the future of their life, I don't think that they should. That they're going into it for all of the wrong reasons.
Well, maybe, but at least they're going into it to begin with, even if it is a terrible reason.
I mean, is it actually a good way on that basis to get people involved to start with? Because the argument is, if you get people voting from an early age, they will keep voting as they carry on. So on that basis, aren't celebrity endorsements actually helpful?
I don't know. Say you get a celebrity endorsement for Party X, but Party Y wins, and so many young people voted for Party X because someone said so. If they get let down and that person can't do anything for them again, so they'll never vote again. But if you get them involved because you get them to believe in an ideal, surely they'll stick around more. I mean, I don't buy this thing that celebrities are the way to get people interested in politics at all. And
well,
that's not
celebrities are the way to get people interested in anything, though. Celebrities are used to get people interested in anything. That's why brands give them things for free, because when celebrities wear them, people are then interested in those products. The general people listen to celebrities and care about celebrities, and so if that is the quickest way to get them interested in politics, I'd say there's nothing wrong with doing that.
It doesn't do any harm, at least.
I think it does in the long run, to be honest. I think if your entire belief is based on X said something and now I'm interested, but X lied to me, why should I bother now again? I think...
Right, so John, in that world, wouldn't there be more younger voters than older voters? Wouldn't young people vote more frequently than older voters?
You'd think so, but it's obviously been borne out that no one's got through to them, despite all the celebrity endorsements.
Dylan,
I mean...
The Liberal Democrats used to trot out John Cleese at every election for many years, and then, of course, I think it was in 2010 they had Daniel Radcliffe, who I believe was made famous for a film franchise called Harry Potter. Now, is it something that adds credence to political parties or not?
Honestly, I don't really understand why we do it. I think it's because I'm interested in politics because I think it's important to know why you're being governed in a certain way, who's governing you, what policies they're putting forward. That's me, though, and that's everyone on the panel is interested in politics for no reason. I mean, no one's here because John Cleese said vote Lib Dem. No one is sat here, or probably watching at home, because someone, because a celebrity said votes for a certain party. But a lot of people will see, say, a party political broadcast on TV. If they see Ed Miliband, they'll think, who the hell's that? I don't know what this is, they'll change the channel. If they see Martin Freeman saying, oh, this is politics, all that jazz, they'll think, oh, I know him from that film about the small person with the dragon. Let's carry on watching this.
Watson, he must have a good idea.
Sorry?
He's Watson. He must have a good idea.
Yeah, exactly. See, they'll know. They can relate to it. If they don't know about politics or politicians at all, they can relate to this celebrity on the TV. No one's going to go into politics and base their entire opinion on what celebrities say. If they do, they're fools. But I don't think anyone actually does that. They'll get into politics they'll segue in via someone they know, a celebrity or a family member, something like that. And I think celebrities are, they're banal and they're really boring and they don't really add much to the debate, but it gets more people involved. I don't think it does any harm, but it just bores me, kind of, the celebrity endorsements now.
Okay, a couple of points people have made here, and then I'm going to ask you, panel, a couple of questions that people have suggested here. I'm going to ask you if there's someone from the last Parliament that you think was probably the worst politician from the last Parliament, and anyone you felt really stood out from the last Parliament. So really the best and worst politician of the last 5 years, okay? So some of the comments people have made here. Cameron S. says, I too am a young person. Our mock election last week got years 7 to 13 very interested. UKIP came second and the Greens third. He doesn't say who came first or anything else. So it's a mystery. It's a mystery, Cameron. Let us know. Joseph, at Joseph D. Cassidy. Young people care a lot in Scotland. Maybe you should have a big referendum or something. And that's true. I mean, there was huge turnout amongst groups who don't normally vote there. That links on to another point Joe Hudson Smalls asked about, and that's to do with, I think it was Joe, to do with lowering the voting age. Oh no, that was Josh. Josh Aaron R. Salman Anwar, getting young people interested via Joey Essex or someone like that. I'd rather them not be interested and not vote. Thank you very much. Matt and the Banshees at Stradihuvius, I completely disagree, if you don't mind. You don't need to roll out celebs, just someone who actually represents the views of young people. Stone Age H at Captain_Facetious. Unfortunately, we live in a world defined by branding and status. A celebrity endorsement is sometimes more persuasive than door visits. David Jeffries making the point here that there's no such thing as young people, it's a vacuous cohort. Chairman Meow, young people have a responsibility to take an interest, to take control of your future. Obviously, politicians have a responsibility too. And Chris G, if you can only get a 16-year-old to vote by having Miley Cyrus twerk while wearing a party banner, good reason not to let them vote. The post-show poll is now live over at spectrumdebates.com, where you can vote for which of our panelists has been your favourite debater from tonight. Of course, you can hang on and vote later on as well. So, panel, our best and worst, our favourite, our least favourite politicians from the last Parliament. Who'd like to start us off?
Go on.
Go on, John.
Over the entirety of the last Parliament, I think my favourite politician has been Ruth Davidson in Scotland. She's just been so fun. And as well as that, she's been very genuine and seems to actually believe everything she says. Unlike Jim Murphy, the new Scottish Labour leader, who just seems to be suffering every time he has to speak about Scottish politics, Ruth Davidson seems to take a general joy in what she's doing.
She's the happiest person I've ever seen on a tank.
I don't know. Nigel was pretty good on a tank, but yeah.
If I was going to say, I think possibly the worst politicians I've seen is either a toss-up between Ed Miliband or Nick Clegg, which, sorry about that, Dylan, for breaking your heart, but to me, he just shows some kind of resentment to the general public, where he feels as though he can be forgiven for making a vlog and taking his tie off and saying, I'm sorry about this. But it just feels like, how can anyone ever trust him or his party again, especially with him leading it? Ed Miliband, as I've said, he's not really done anything that's been as offensive as Nick Clegg, in my opinion, but he hasn't performed well as a leader or a general politician, I think.
Thank you very much, Dylan.
The worst is George Galloway. No explanation needed. And
Come on,
and the
explanation needed. Explanation needed. Why is George Galloway so bad in your view? There are many people who find him an inspiration.
Genuine, yeah. It's genuinely not even that much to do with politics. I just think he's an arse, and so I really don't like him. And he blocked me on Twitter, so my follower count went down. So
fair enough. Do you have a best politician?
Oh yeah, Nick Clegg. That I don't. Because genuinely, everyone's going to laugh, but I think Nick Clegg's been the best politician of the last Parliament, because even though we've been the minor party in a coalition, we've still delivered something like 85% of our manifesto, which I think is phenomenal, considering we're a tiny party, absolutely eclipsed by the Conservatives, who've forced through quite a lot of their manifesto. With things like the pupil premium, mental health funding, protecting the NHS, things like that, we've still managed to make sure. No, we've still managed to make sure that that's been implemented over the 5 years. So I think he's actually done really well.
Thank you very much, Nathaniel. Best and worst politicians of the last 5 years.
Respectfully, I'm not going to comment. I'm 18 years old and I've only been interested in politics for less than half a year. I couldn't comment, to be honest.
Fair enough.
I haven't been involved in it for all of it, for even half of this.
All right. Well, thinking just positively, then, is there anyone who has stood out to you perhaps who helped get you involved?
Who got me involved? No, sorry.
Fair enough. Liam.
Best is Theresa May. By far for me. I think she is a great Home Secretary. And what really tops it off was the European arrest warrant debate, where she was so sassy in response to Yvette Cooper. That sort of put the icing on the top for me. And the worst is my MP Alan Campbell, who has one of the worst records in Parliament. I think he's spoken something like 2 times this Parliament, but will win this seat automatically because no one knows any different, quite frankly.
Okay, that was a slightly depressing at the end of that answer there. John, you've given us your favourite, your best. Who do you think has been the worst from the last 5 years?
To link it to Dylan's answer, actually, I'm going to go for Lutfer Rahman, the mayor of Tower Hamlets, and his supporters.
The ex-mayor of Tower Hamlets.
Ex-mayor of Tower Hamlets, and his supporters, George Galloway amongst them, who has not only taken the electorate for a ride, but has also taken a lot of the establishment for a ride as well, with blatant criminality. So I think it's perhaps the biggest political scandal of the last 5 years.
Fair enough. And Daryl, I don't think you gave us a best politician.
Nicola Sturgeon, she's smashing. I mean, I don't think she's done one thing wrong since taking her position as First Minister of Scotland. Everything she's said is pretty on point so far. She seems to give a good message.
I have to say, I mean, as someone looking on it from outside, someone of a natural unionist persuasion, I have always been impressed with Alex Salmond and Nicola Sturgeon, because they seem, for people who have a very clear view of what they want to achieve, and could be, and has, the SNP has in the past been viewed as a single-issue party, and, they used to be accused of being the tartan Tories and so on. Alex Salmond and Nicola Sturgeon have created far more than just a rounded party. They've created a movement, and I think, it's hard to argue that those two have not had a hugely profound effect on the UK. Whether or not your view of that is that it's positive, of course, is another thing, but that they are immense politicians, aren't they?
Yeah.
Does anyone have a contrary view on that?
I think Leanne Wood is the better nationalist leader, to be honest.
Why?
She just came across as more likeable and polished in the debates than Nicola Sturgeon.
I disagree. Speaking to people after those debates, I've heard her referred to as shrieking banshee, and Natalie Bennett did this as well, just came across as irrelevant quite a lot of the time.
Ah, but do you live in Wales? She went down very well round here.
But I mean, what progress will Plaid Cymru possibly? I mean, is it 3 MPs they have at the moment?
They might get an extra one.
An extra one, blimey! I mean, that's...
And they predicted to get exactly the same percentage of the vote as they did last election.
Yeah, they'll come behind us in votes around here, sadly.
Okay. Well, a few of the things that you've tweeted at home so far. Chairman Meow says George Galloway is the worst politician. James, Statism Room 101, has just tweeted a picture of Diane Abbott wearing an England shirt. I don't know if it's a Photoshop or not, and he doesn't put any comment on it. But we leave that there. Salman Anwar says the best MPs have been Anna Soubry and Sarah Wollaston. Michael Craig agrees with Jack. At Michael Craig 96, the worst politician is George Galloway. Of course, he'll see this and probably threaten to sue me. Salman Anwar says yes, Ruth Davidson is great. She's agreeing with that one there. Josh, will Liam say Theresa May? He predicted what you were going to say there, which is always rather good. Weird Times, at Weird Times. The best has been Frank Field and the worst has been Clegg, but that's in a tough field. Chris G, in the last 5 years, the best MPs have been Nicola Blackwood, Jacob Rees-Mogg, and for sheer guts, Esther McVeigh. And the worst MP, Chris Huhne, do you remember him?
Oh.
Matt, Stradihuvius, shockingly I disagree with the Dazro, and I love Nick Clegg's willingness to be blunt towards the electorate. Joseph, at Joseph D. Cassidy, Ed Miliband stopped war in Syria, took on Murdoch, and set the course for Labour after Blair and Brown. So I'm assuming he thinks he's one of the best politicians.
But wait, did he stop a war in Syria?
Well,
I'm pretty sure there's still a war going on.
Obviously, I think Joseph means that it's stopping UK involvement in that war. And obviously he believes that's a good thing.
We're still bombing them, aren't we?
That's perhaps a topic for another time. Michael Craig, best politician Zach Goldsmith. He led the recall bill that really should have been implemented. Some more people here. Jacob Rees-Mogg, best MP. Nadine Dorries, the worst MP. Again, more Jacob Rees-Mogg and Rory Stewart going down really well. Someone says the worst one, Mark the traitor reckless, says William Brown. Theresa May.
Tell Daniel, me you loved him beforehand.
Yes, he's probably expecting that. Daniel who talks of Caroline Lucas. Eric Joyce, the best political heavyweight puncher, says Myra. So I should have read that before I read it, shouldn't I? Where else? Other people here. Someone's vibrating. I'm assuming it's your phone. And so, Salman Anwar, unionist, but I admire Nicola Sturgeon, and Leanne Wood is pretty neat too. Cameron S. Nicola Sturgeon flies around in a very expensive personalised helicopter preaching about austerity. Joseph says, you think Leanne Wood is the better nationalist because she's the least successful nationalist? She's pointing that at you. Joe. Salman Anwar. Natalie, it's my turn to come in now, Bennett. I think he did do the middle bit in capitals, so I added the accent myself. And where else? Oh, Gordon Brown did well during the Indie Ref, says Josh. Joe Pattinson says, my university MP, Stephen Mosley, the MP for Chester, he's a role model on how to be a local MP. So, quite a rounded view there of the best and the worst. Now, we're going to end this show shortly. I'm going to ask my guests what they think is actually going to happen over the next week, 2 weeks, or thereabouts. So, first of all, what do you think is going to be the outcome on Thursday? Obviously, each of us has some level of bias in there, but I asked you before what your ideal outcome was. Now I want you to tell me, what do you think is actually going to happen this Thursday and beyond? And I don't know if anyone wants to volunteer to go first on that, but before you do, Alessia Upon a Cloud says, if Spectrum Debates is anything to go by, the next party leader of the Conservatives should be Jacob Rees-Mogg. He has my vote anyway. Cavan Butcher, at Cavan Butcher, is a bit shocked that someone's mentioned Theresa May as being the best politician here. And William Brown actually says that Caroline Lucas would have been his second choice for the worst MP, and he's responding to Daniel there. So quite a wide range of views. So who'd like to go first and tell me what do you think is actually going to happen this week?
Re-election.
Yeah, why is that going to happen?
Just I can't see what possible government could be formed from what's going to happen.
So how long do you think the Parliament will last until we go back to the polls?
I couldn't say.
And what do you think what do you think might happen with the Green Party? I mean, as a supporter, at the moment they have one MP in Caroline Lucas. Do you think she'll hang on? And what about expanding the Green Party base?
I think she'll definitely hang on. I think people who are entertaining the idea that she's going to lose her seat are just insane. And I think they're probably not going to gain another seat. I'd really like them to, but they're probably not going to, simply because of how spread out our vote base is. But yeah, sorry.
That's fair enough. Dylan, tell me, what do you think the actual outcome of Thursday is going to be?
I think probably a Tory minority government. I think they'll get the most seats and the most votes, but I don't think it will last very long because they'll have quite a lot of opposition, especially with the SNP coming up in Scotland. I think they'll have quite a lot of opposition from them. Obviously, a lot of opposition from Labour. The Liberals probably won't go with them again unless they can form a majority coalition, so there's no point in them going with them if it's just going to be a minority government. And I think I agree with Nate in the fact it's going to be another election, but I'm not sure when.
Thank you. Darryl, how about you? What's the outcome going to be?
I think very close to possibilities. Either it's going to be a neat coalition between the SNP and Labour, and even though they've said they're not going to do it, Labour are just going to turn around because Ed Miliband's never said that he's not going to. He's not going to negotiate with the SNP. He's never said that. He says we won't bow to them, but he's never ruled out negotiating with the SNP. So I think in much of England, Labour's going to come up on top and they're going to enter a coalition with the SNP. Otherwise, though, it might be the Conservatives again, because I have the feeling that people are just going to vote Conservative again, in which case I do see more friction between them and the SNP, and it might result in a second election. I don't think so. I don't think it's going to result in that. But either way, I think it might be Labour and the SNP a coalition.
Thank you very much, Liam.
I think it's going to be a Conservative minority, but if we don't get over around 280 seats, I believe I read this morning that if we don't get more seats than Labour, then the Prime Minister's going to stand down on Friday afternoon, and that the party are going to meet at 4 p.m. to discuss that. But if we don't get as many seats as Labour, I would fully expect an election to be called before summer recess and to happen around October. I think that's what we expect up here.
Thank you very much. And John?
To be honest, I think the most likely outcome will be a Tory minority government. But I think everyone is underestimating their chances, to be honest. I think the Tories might get as high as 290 or more seats. And I think with the Lib Dems, because I think the Lib Dems will cling on more than we expect, I think with the Lib Dems and perhaps one other party, they'll probably be able to form a government. Whether it lasts very long or not, we'll see. But I wouldn't completely put it out of my mind that the Tories and Labour might do some sort of confidence arrangement just to keep things ticking over. I can see a grand coalition happening because it's happened before in Europe.
And of course, the UKIPper brings us back to Europe. No,
and of course, then that will allow us to be the true opposition and gain 300 seats next time.
Naturally. As we know, it worked extremely well for the FDP and the AfD in Germany. It's storming ahead for them because of the Grand Coalition there.
Exactly.
Okay, what you've said at home here. Some compliments from Leon French to you, Nathaniel, about how honest and non-partisan and realistic you're being there. Chris G is very specific. He says the Conservatives 310, Labour 249, the SNP 42, Lib Dems 24, and then it carries on. He thinks it'll be 3 Plaid, 3 SDLP, a Green, a Respect, 1 UKIP, and 5 Sinn Féin. Leon French thinks re-election will probably come in a few months' time. Matt, re-election is possible. Salman Anwar, the Conservatives will have the most seats. Labour and others, excluding the Lib Dems, won't have enough, so the Tories will form a minority government. Cameron S. Cameron Stevenson, where are we? I've lost the first part of your tweet there, Cameron. He says he's usually a pessimist, but he says he thinks Miliband will be PM simply because Labour and the SNP's number could be hard to match by the Conservatives, the UKIP and the DUP, but it'll only last a year or two. So partly agreeing with you there, Darryl. The Gunslinger, what will happen on Thursday? The sun will rise in the east and set in the west. That is, of course, right. Pyro the Crazy Fool, it'll be a Tory minority government. Stone Age H, on Thursday there will be a massive lizard invasion and we will be forced into servitude of the Grand King Lizard. I know nothing about that because naturally I am not a lizard, although I was actually genuinely accused by UKIP of being a lizard overlord, I kid you not.
You're fooling no one, Gareth, we know.
Put it on your CV, Gareth, that is brilliant.
That's why I have to wear jumpers. It's the only thing that keeps the scales in. Joseph D. Cassidy, there's literally no prediction by anyone that doesn't give an anti-Tory majority. So it's an interesting set. My own view, again, I'm giving an opinion here, to which I apologise, but my own view, which I've shared for a long time, is that there will be a double Kinnock effect this year, like there was in '92. People went into the polling stations in '92 expecting to vote Labour, and that's why the exit polls suggested Labour would come out as the largest party, because the exit polls weren't actually exit polls. They asked people what they were going to do when they were going in. And when they got into the polling booth and they looked at their ballot papers and they thought, oh, but that nice Mr. Major, we know what he's like, are we going to put this at risk? And they voted Conservative. And John Major ended up with more votes than anyone ever before or since. And I think this time there'll be a double Kinnock effect. I think people will go in intending to vote Labour, and then they'll think back to the giant stone, and they'll think back to various other things from Labour, and they will decide that actually it's probably better to stick with how we are at the moment and give it a bit longer. And quite a few people who will be going in thinking, I'm going to vote UKIP because of this, that, and the other, will then think, but Ed Miliband, I don't want him as Prime Minister, and that's the double Kinnock effect we'll have there. And so my view is,
the fear of Ed Miliband against UKIP voters is a very effective one. It's very hard to fight.
Yeah.
Amongst us.
Absolutely, and that's why I think I would not be surprised if the Conservatives end up taking into account the fact that they are possibly going to win a few seats off the Liberal Democrats, when ending up with more seats after the election than they've already got. And I certainly don't think it's going to be substantially fewer. But again, I am potentially biased because I am a blue, so bear that in mind. And there we are. That is it, really. Thank you all very much indeed for taking part in tonight's show. Thank you to Darryl, and thank you to Dylan, thank you to John, thank you to Liam, thank you to Nathaniel, and thank you to all of you at home for your comments and your questions and your suggestions. Next week, we will know the result of the election, or if nothing else, we will know who's won each seat. Whether or not we know who the government is, waits to be seen. I miss the days when by 3 o'clock on the Friday morning we had one person about to move out of Downing Street and another one about to move in. Those days seem like a heady history that some of us might not live through again for a long time, if ever at all. Thank you very much for watching our first 25 shows. We'll be back after the election next Sunday. If you'd like to join us on the panel, then please get in touch. I've already got at least one panelist lined up, so let me know, and we'll see what we can make of the election result that's going to happen, hopefully, on Thursday and Friday, and we'll get something out of it. If nothing else, go and vote. Remind your neighbours to go and vote. Remind your friends to go and vote. And let's see if we can at least beat the turnout from last time, if not the certainty of the election results. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Good night.
Good night.